Dear Donau Soja partners and friends. It's 11 sharp, and we are ready to start our webinar on European Soya 2022. But I ask you for 3 minutes, 5 minutes of patience to give more people the chance to come in. We start in some minutes.
Axel, you are muted.
Okay, so second try. Good morning again. I get a thumbs up, so I hope you can hear me. A warm welcome again to the webinar European Soya 2022, Growing from Strength to Strength. My name is Axel Grund. I will steer us through these next 60 minutes of information on the current soya situation. Donau Soja organizes this webinar. Again? No? You can hear me. Okay. Donau Soja organizes this webinar as an opportunity to spread information about the soya season and the situation in Europe. We are going to present the latest harvest figures for European soya with a special focus on Ukraine. We will look at the future of European soya production and take a deep dive into Ukraine as it is the leading European soya producing country. Also, we will talk about protein partnerships, about Donau Soja's program to increase the sustainable soya supply in Europe for Europe. But before we start, let me address some organizational issues. First, we are streaming this webinar on LinkedIn and on YouTube on both Donau Soja channels simultaneously, and it will be recorded for later dissemination. Second, we invite you to ask your questions. That means please post them in the chat on the platform of your choice, on LinkedIn or on YouTube. I will collect your issues later, and we are going to answer them bundled between the speeches and after them. Let me now start the show by introducing today's speakers. Here with me in Vienna is Susanne Frommwald, Donau Soja Senior Advisor. She's also responsible for Donau Soja's Protein Partnership Program. And in Kiev, I have the honor to introduce soya expert and quality manager Volodymyr Pugachov. We hope the connection to Ukraine stays stable, and already now I ask you for your patience if we are interrupted. Also with us, there are colleagues from different Donau Soja offices, from the Ukraine, from Serbia, from Budapest, even from our new office in Amsterdam. So if you have any special questions on their topics, you can also raise your questions later. So a little less conversation, a little more action. I give the floor to Susanne.
Thank you, Axel. Also warm welcome from my side. I'm happy to see that today we have a truly international audience. I've seen already greetings from Finland, of course also greetings back to Yoku. As you all know well, we as Donau Soja, we are dealing with European soy cultivation and consumption in a global context, and that's why today we are happy to speak about the Soy Campaign 2022 in Europe. Our activities related to this, our activities as Donau Soja, with a special focus on Ukraine, as Axel mentioned already, because Ukraine is still #1 country in European soy cultivation, despite the war and all related challenges, and also #1 country in our Protein Partnership Program, aiming to increase sustainable soy cultivation in Europe for Europe. So as Axel mentioned already, my name is Susanne Frommwald. I'm Senior Advisor of Donau Soja and International Project Leader for the Protein Partnership. I'm based in Vienna, but Donau Soja is a really truly European organization, and that's why also warm welcome from my side to colleagues in regional offices like Novi Sad, Chisinau, Ukraine, and other colleagues, Romania, Amsterdam. With this short introduction, I would like to start coming to the topic of today's webinar, and to start with an overview about the soybean development in the EU. As you can see, on the left side is the development of the soy area in the last 10 years, and you can see the comparison last year and this year. So we do have an increase of almost 10% in soy acreage in the EU. But on the right side, you can see the other part of the story. The output at the same time went down for almost 12% in Europe. Still, it's an impressive increase in the last 10 years, but compared to last year, it's a decrease of 12%. On the next slide, you can see the situation. Oops, that was too fast. You can see the situation in Europe, speaking geographically about Europe. Here is also on the left side an increase in area. It's almost 10% increase in soy area in Europe. But on the right side, compared to the EU, you see the different picture. There is also an increase in soy output for almost 4%. So the message is clear that the non-EU countries compensate the decrease in volumes of the EU countries for this year. On the next slide, you can have a look at the figures on the country level. So on the left side, you can see again the area, on the right side, the output. So as mentioned before, Ukraine is still the #1 country in terms of output, but you can see on the left side area, Serbia, France, Italy, some very relevant countries in soy cultivation in Europe. On the right side, if you look at the output, you can see a significant decrease, but the total result overall in Europe is still an increase. So we will also share the presentation with you later on, so you can have a more detailed look on the countries and the figures. On the next slide, it's a more visual perspective on the country level. So here you see on the left side again the area. In green, you can see the increase. In, let's say, orange, you can see the decrease, and you see on the right side the output. There we really do have some significant decrease in the output due to bad weather conditions, especially in main soy growing countries like Italy and Serbia. And to give you also an idea about Donau Soja and Europe Soya volumes and overview about the situation this year. Harvest and certification is not yet fully completed, but we can say that we will definitely have more than 1 million tons certified Donau Soja Europe soya beans. This is more than 10% of the European soy production. We have beans produced in 12 countries, and we do have more than 10,000 farmers that are producing certified beans that are stored in more than 200 collectors in 12 countries. And also, of course, in the value chain, we have 11 crushers and 25 other soy processors like toasters. As mentioned in the slides before, soy is clearly on the rise in Europe if you have a look at the 10 years perspective. So on the left side, again, you see the area. In the last 10 years, we saw a plus of 82% in acreage. And on the right side, you see that the output was more than doubled. So it's an increase of 123%. And we do think there is an easy to catch potential to increase the volume for another 50% and to come to 50 million tons in Europe. If you want to have more information about all these facts and figures like forecasts, yields, but also development in prices, premiums, non-GM premiums, high pro short, low pro meal, we do have this so-called market report that is issued on a monthly basis, and it's a service. It's free. It's a free service for our members, and it can be ordered if you want to have such information on a regular basis. And yeah, to shortly speak also about what's the purpose of our activities, what's our mission as Donau Soja, why are we dealing with this? So our aim is to go for a protein transition in Europe, which basically means more sustainable soy production and more plant-based soy consumption in Europe. So our vision is to decrease consumption from today's around 40 million tons to something like 30 billion tons because of various factors. And we do think that approximately half of the production can come from Europe, and half of it should come from imports that are also produced under sustainable conditions. Protein strategy is a tool that we have developed to reach this goal, and I just want to mention shortly the 5 pillars. So we think that imports need to become 100% sustainable. Here is a lot of efforts also going on EU level. Second pillar, of course, is to increase European production of sustainable soy. That's the main activity of Donau Soja. Then, of course, efficiency needs to be increased in protein feeding. Diversity is an important issue, like not only soya, but also other legumes. And last but not least, a change to more healthy diets, which basically means a big shift towards plant-based diets. Why are we optimistic that this is an achievable goal? To increase to 50 million tons in Europe and to have 50% of consumption being produced in Europe. One thing is that actually soy grows really well in Europe. And if you have a look at the left side of the slide, you can see that out of the 10 top yields, globally speaking, 6 are in Europe. So of course, Brazil and US are the winners, but there is countries like Italy, Austria, Germany, Croatia, Serbia, Hungary that are under the top 10, talking about the top soy yields. And in the same time, soy is very little represented in European crop rotation. On the right side, you see the figures for the EU. So you can see that in EU's crop rotation, there is only 1% soybean and 2% legumes in total. So there is obviously a big potential to increase soy cultivation in Europe, or legumes cultivation in general. Here is another interesting aspect that is largely discussed also in terms of COVID, war, and all these other things, that it is important to become a bit more resilient. So at this moment, the EU produces only 8%. So self-sufficiency is at 8%. If you go to Europe, the picture is already better. It's at 22%, but we think that it's possible to increase to 50%. But as you can see here as well, non-EU countries play a significant role in European soy supply. So then the question how to realize the potential and increase sustainable soy cultivation in Europe. First point is obviously, and it mostly refers to Western Europe, to have a better crop rotation. And legumes and soy is really needed here as a so-called break crop because of existing diseases, resistances, and all the other things. And in Eastern Europe, it's mostly about closing the yield gap, something that my colleague Vladimir Pugachev is going to speak more about it, because also here the protein partnership can play a significant role. And generally speaking, Donau Soja Protein Partnership is just a perfect tool to increase sustainable soil cultivation in Europe for Europe. So what is it in a nutshell? The purpose of the program is to increase the sustainable soy production, mostly in non-EU countries, because of the impact in terms of sustainability and volumes. 2/3 of European soy are grown outside the European Union. Because it covers knowledge transfer activities and pays for certification, and additionally supports market uptake and value chain building. Partners, supporters of the Protein Partnership Program may use volumes to compensate for soy that's coming from non-sustainable or unclear origin, and therefore compensate negative soy footprint, their negative soy footprint. And also to mention that soybeans or products from protein partnerships are sustainable, non-GM, and also deforestation conversion free, which is really an important issue nowadays. Talking about sustainability, just a flashlight on the aspect of the CO2 emissions. On the left side, you can see the comparison CO2 emissions of per kilo soybean produced average produced in Brazil compared to Donau Soja Europe soya produced beans in Europe. So there is a reduction of more than 90%. But the interesting thing is also, if you switch to the right side, if you compare Donau Soja Europe soya certified beans in 4 countries that we have mentioned here to the average European soy production, it is still a 50% reduced CO2 emissions. And if you look at Serbia, for example, it's even only a third. So by going Donau Soja certified soy production, you can have a significant contribution to reduce your CO2 emissions. And at the end of my presentation part, I would like to give a short summary about the Protein Partnership, what it is, which countries, the volumes. So here you can see the program started in Serbia and Croatia. So actually the colleagues in the Novi Sad office, the regional center for South and Eastern Europe for Donau Soja, they were the pioneers in the Protein Partnership program. That's where it started. And then in 21, Ukrainian partners joined the program, and this year, for the first time, we have also partners in Moldova and Bosnia-Herzegovina. And you can see that this year, the volumes increased significantly. This is mostly due to Ukraine, but here also my colleague will give some more information later. And protein partnerships are supported by 13 partners. Basically, the main supporters in this year in 22 are Lidl, Kaufland, Bioma, and Rewe. So they are supporting the activities in the countries that also my colleague Vladimir is going to give more details later on. And all this program is done in cooperation with Austrian Development Agency, ADA, as a part of our strategic partnership. So I would like to stop my presentation here. And I think we're having a short break now to have some questions of understanding. And I would like to ask Axel probably to summarize some questions that we should answer now.
Susanne. Thank you. More than 10,000 farmers in 12 countries are producing Donau Soja certified soya. Quite an impressive figure. I see two questions in the chat. One short question of understanding. Angela is asking, do the yield figures for Brazil and the USA refer to both GMO and non-GM soy?
I think we do not have a differentiation here, but we can follow up on this question and give you a reply also later on. But to my understanding, there is no difference. The figures don't make a difference here.
And the second question concerns the European Union level. Adrian wants to know, do you have any concerns on meeting upcoming EU regulation in the delivery of this growth? Or do you see this as bringing more opportunities, specifically EU Green Deal and deforestation proposals? And in the meantime, our colleague in Budapest, Catalan Krupa, answers, yes, Brazilian and USA yield figures refer to both GMO and non-GMO.
Thank you, Bertalan. So talking about the upcoming EU legislation, of course, this is a really important piece of legislation. We don't know the details yet. Generally speaking, of course, it is very good and important and welcome that Europe starts to take care about its supply chains and tries to make an attempt to get the supply chains more sustainable and deforestation free. But there is also some critical points, like a very late cutoff date, like the scope is very narrow, it's not conversion free, just deforestation free. But the good thing is also that it's heading to segregation and traceability, something that the sustainable non-GM standards can give you already today. So a short answer is that we welcome this very much, but details need to be checked to see what will be the result in the end. And of course, I see greetings from Poland, so greetings back to Poland as well.
Thank you, Susanne. The harvesting season is finished in Ukraine. And keep in mind that though there is a war raging, 29.1 million tons of agricultural products have left Ukraine since the beginning of the war. Ukraine still has the biggest potential concerning soya. 3.7 million tons of soybeans have been produced in 2022 with stable exports despite the war. Again, let me welcome Volodymyr Pugachov from Donau Soja in Kyiv. The stage is yours.
Thank you, dear Axel. Thank you, colleagues. And I'm really very happy to see such big interest and such big amount of participants and appreciation about our webinar. My name is Volodymyr. I work in Donau Soja, Ukraine, implementing big amount of activities and supporting farmers with different programs via Donau Soja organization. I'm located in Kiev, and now I will start to share my presentation. So let's start. Today we are going to talk about European soya and also how we can increase the volumes of production and sustainability of production non-GM, sustainable deforestation-free, conversion-free soybeans. So let's just start. I will be focusing on Ukraine as my activities actually ongoing in this country. Let's go to the most interesting figure, to the figure related to soya areas. As you can see, development of soya production in Ukraine started long time ago. However, since mid of 2010s, it was on very not so professional level, but starting from 2013, 14, 15, it was entrance of professional agriculture. Companies increased the yields, companies increased the knowledge, and starting to produce soybeans on a quite good level. As you can see, there was a decrease of areas starting from 2020s that was caused by different obstacles, fiscal obstacles, weather conditions, etc., etc. Prices for soybeans were not so good and not so profitable in that period. Very interesting, the year of 2022. As you know, now we are experiencing the war, the aggression, military actions on the territory of Ukraine, unfortunately. However, the soya production stays stable, and the areas of soya cultivation even increased comparing to the last 2 years. However, further in my slides, I will show why it happened. So if to come to the yields and volumes of production, you may see on your screen the yields and the volumes. The yields were increasing, as I told, that the knowledge of farmers, knowledge of companies really progressed so well in Ukraine. And now we have the level of yields between 2.5 till 2.7 tons per hectare. Which really results in quite good levels of production of soya, between 3 and 4 million tons annually. What is really interesting, this is the last 3 years, so and even 4 years. So you can see that the level of production in 2022 under the war conditions for soya really stays on the same level as 3 years ago, 2019, and even bigger than in the last 2 years. So why it was? What was the reasons mostly for that? As you can see, main soya production areas located in central and western part of Ukraine that definitely were not so much affected by ordinary military actions, but still they're staying under rocket shelling and bombing, which definitely not makes a good conditions for doing any business and agriculture, but still these areas are quite good for soya producing. However, the increase of soya areas was done because of decrease of production of other crops and decrease of sowing of other crops. If we go to the sowing campaign 2022, and in Ukraine each year we have two sowings, sowing of spring crops and sowing of winter crops. So if we focus on the sowing of spring crops that was finished in May 2022, it was a decrease of about 20% in total for the sown areas. But if we look at the winter crop sowing campaign that actually is finalizing now, the decrease is even bigger. So the decrease is 40% for all crops that we are talking. So the biggest change is related actually to wheat, winter and spring in total, minus 43%, for barley, sunflower, and corn. And generally, if we look at the rapeseed and soya oil seeds, they're doing quite okay. The areas increased. Some reasons for that. Actually, soya is more profitable than wheat, corn, for example. Secondly, it requires less inputs, less fertilizers. Thirdly, it's good for soil. And definitely you need less storage capacities and transport capacities to export and to transfer these crops from one destination to another. I will focus on this more in my following slides. Now we have almost finished the harvesting of spring crops and some of the winter crops. It was really hard season, also due to weather conditions. The harvesting was delayed for 3 and 4 weeks, something like this. The most, I should say, challenging situation with corn, harvesting of corn. Now it's only 60% of areas of corn is harvested, and now all Ukrainian fields are covered with snow and frost. So it looks like harvesting of corn going to be completed only in February 2023. You may know, as you are all agricultural professionals, that this really plays very, very badly to the quality of the yield. However, the volume should be sufficient for Europe. So if we talk about wheat, the decrease is 39% in harvesting. About crop, I'm not talking. There is no reason to compare, as still big amount of areas are not harvested, staying in the fields. There is a decrease in sunflower. The figures are on the screen, the decrease in barley, and the increase of total production of soya, 3.7 million tons, and rapeseed, 3.2 million tons were harvested. From here, I should say that in general, Ukraine is self-sufficient with agricultural products, including soybeans. And agricultural industry in total, agricultural production is oriented for exporting, because under normal circumstances, for the previous years, almost 75% of Ukraine's grain production was exported to different other countries. So this means that self-sufficiency ratio is 4 times exceeds the internal consumption. So Ukraine produces 4 times more than consumed internally. That's why, and this refers to actually all crops, including soybeans. There is a soya processing inside the country, but here I'd like to point out that large part of domestically produced soya is exported also as soya meal. So the internal consumption is even less than internal processing. And definitely, exporting is a matter of normal functioning of agricultural industry in Ukraine. So we can't say that we will stop exporting. Then the farmer will simply ask a very good question, like, look, but why then I need to produce 4 times more? So I can produce 4 times less and to be self-sufficient. But anyway, this would be badly for agricultural production, for cash flow of agricultural production. Definitely, that's why Ukraine produced such big volumes of production of crops, including soybeans, but orienting for exporting. Here, you can see a supply and demand balance for soybeans in 1,000 tons that was provided for us by our friends, consulting agency APK Inform. And you see here 2 scenarios, optimistic and pessimistic for soybeans, where harvesting is on the level of 3.7 million tons. There is some end stocks from the previous seasons. And in optimistic scenario, the internal consumption, meaning internal processing, is bigger than in the previous year, and the exporting is bigger, so reaching up to 1.9 million tons of soybeans that might be exported from Ukraine. Pessimistic scenario is a bit worse in internal processing and also exporting. However, please pay attention that in both optimistic and pessimistic scenario for year for harvest 2022, the exporting volumes are bigger than the volumes of export for soybeans in the previous season. So optimistic scenario almost 40% bigger, pessimistic around 10% bigger. So now the main question, as I was focusing so much on export, on logistics, on transporting and storage, a question: how the war affecting Ukrainian agriculture? There is, as Ukraine export-oriented country, there is a big issue with the routes for exports. And when the war started, Black Sea and Azov Sea went blocked. But main areas for export from Ukraine, main corridors for export from Ukraine, it was the ports of Black Sea. So normally Ukraine exported around 5 million tons per month only via ports. And the inland alternative routes, the capacities of that routes are really limited. They were limited because we never had the need to go so much via the inland routes. However, that was a big issue starting from February for almost all crops and for soybeans. This is why Donau Soja, as an organization that works in this country and also works to establish stable non-GM value chains in Europe related to soybeans, to sustainable soybeans, started to support Ukrainian companies to organize alternative inland export routes and establish a stable value chains from the country. So actually, Donau Soja in its activities also implementing protein partnerships focused to do the following. So focused on the training for the farmers, how to do sustainable farming, how to increase the yields, and also new topic appeared. So how to do agriculture, how to do farming in the conditions of limited resources, because you have limited seeds, fertilizers, fuels, everything, limited resources of workers, tractors, etc., and also activities how to overcome the bottleneck with export routes from Ukraine caused by blocks of Black Sea ports and Azov ports. So, for example, Donau Soja organized, facilitated ministerial discussion on April on Prague Karlsbörse, commodity exchange, and also the similar discussion in Milano in May with Italian government, so to facilitate the export possibilities. Also, Donau Soja supported organizational of Ukrainian national stands. You can see the main commodity exchanges where we were present and supported, just to show that Ukrainian farmers are here. You can talk with them, you can establish the contracts, and you can start exporting. Definitely, it's a challenge, but we all Europeans need to overcome this challenge. Very big gratitude to the initiative called European Union Solidarity Lines. So the initiative of European Commission that had the idea to help to exporting for agricultural goods with some urgent actions like additional freight, additional vessels, additional trucks, prioritized capacities for transport networking, transshipment terminals, flexibility in customs operations and other inspections, elimination of export duties, and help with storage of goods on the territory of the European Union. There is also some actions in mid-term and long-term, like proposals for connecting European facility, proposals for establishing a new roads, new railway roads, because you know there is a difference in width of railroads between Ukraine and European Union. So you can't simply load a train of soybeans meet in Ukraine and go, for example, to Austria by railroad. You need to change the rail tracks in the border terminal. So that is also the initiative, and also the initiative to connect under interconnection to trans-European transport network to neighboring countries. And I should say that actually all of these in general worked. I'm usually a very optimistic person, but even in these conditions, I was a bit pessimistic that there would not be possibility to reach the levels of exports without the ports. But you know that also ports now functioning because of grain corridors. They are quite limited in time and very unstable with different obstacles, like delays, like obstacles to export some goods, agricultural goods, I mean. But nevertheless, in totally, it worked, and the level of export stays the same as previous years without the war, and for some commodities, it even bigger. So, for example, if to look at soybeans, what happened with the export of soybeans? Just for 2 months of the season 2022, meaning for September and October, almost 500,000 tons of soybeans were exported from Ukraine, and that is 2.5 times higher than the volume for the same period of previous year. And this is the maximum for the 3 years. You can see that main export destinations for soybeans are European Union, 46% of export, and Turkey 37%. Turkey just because the grain corridors are operating. And if you look at the diagrams, you can see that European Union increased supply from Ukraine 6 times. Turkey increased just 2 times. So meaning that for soybeans, European Union now is a top priority market for Ukraine, and interconnection and development of common understanding, development of common agricultural practices, at least for growing soybeans, is a top priority for Ukraine and definitely top priority for Donau Soja. Again, I'd like to point out why Ukraine is relevant for soya production in Europe. Some figures that already mentioned Susanne, that Europe produces around 10 million tons of soybeans, which is approximately only fifth part of European internal demand. However, 2/3 is cultivated in non-EU countries like Ukraine, Serbia. Ukraine has the biggest potential in terms of volumes and sustainability. 3.7 million tons of soybeans are already produced in this year, and exports stay stable even despite the war conditions, sometimes even increasing. Still, Ukraine has challenges in the production that we need to overcome, and Donau Soja is actively working on this. So this is challenges like illegal GM cultivation, hazardous pesticides use, and climate change. The Protein Partnership Program is a program developed to support farmers in knowledge transfer, to cover certification costs, and to cover laboratory analysis appears. And this year we have 20 partners in Ukraine that produce around 500,000 tons of certified sustainable deforestation and conversion-free non-GM soybeans. This is some information about our office. We were established in 2018 in Ukraine, and still we actively increasing our activities and operations. But let's focus on the activities under Protein Partnership Program. Susanne already told about countries participating in the program and partners participating in the program. And what we do under this program in Ukraine, we do knowledge transfer and farmers training to increase the level of sustainability or sustainable production. Also, we cover the certification costs for farmers, cooperatives, and agricultural collectors to ensure that farmers comply with Donau Soja and Europe Soya requirements, being non-GM, being sustainable, being deforestation conversion-free, and also we conduct activities for value chain building and increasing the market uptake. So if the volumes is there, if the volumes are certified, they definitely need to be processed and consumed internally in Europe for Europe. So we can say that we had increased interest for farmers this year in Ukraine to participate in the Protein Partnership Program, because this actually gives additional opportunities on the European Union market and helps to adapt to European Union conditions, requirements, and even go beyond some of sustainability requirements. If to go about issues, there is definitely an issue of illegal GM cultivation under the total, where our organization assesses that the total cultivation in Ukraine of illegal GMs for soybeans is around 48%. Definitely the issue of pesticides use, hazardous pesticides use, because there is a difference between Ukraine national system for pesticide registration and European Union system for pesticide registration. You can see on your screen the number of substances registered for use in plant protection products. How many of them are not approved in European Union? How many of them are listed as highly hazardous by World Health Organization? And definitely there is a pathway we need to go, because Ukraine applied for a membership in the European Union, and farmers need to be compliant with European Union requirements to use good pesticides, let's say like this. And also the issue of sustainable soya cultivation, like adaptation to climate change. Um, we are experiencing enormous climate change in Ukraine. For example, if we compare the conditions for the last 30 years, the areas related to steppe zone increased for around 200 kilometers going on north. You can see the maps on the screen. And this results in quite unpredictable conditions for the farmers. For example, season 2020, it was scarcity of rain and resulted in harvest loss of around 14% for all crops. And we had also extra rainy season in 2021 that resulted to partly losses to some farmers that used not proper varieties of grains. And in season 2022, it was very good conditions, but quite big delay in harvesting. So to overcome this challenge, we conducted a bunch of activities. So, for example, we established a special format of online knowledge transfer activities like Soya Discussion Club, where experts focusing on several topics like limited resources on farm, proper non-GM seed selection, benefits of using macrobiological preparations as a solution to decrease the fertilizers use, importance and practical examples of implementations of integrated pest management, and definitely adaptation to the climate change. We base our activities on practical on-field studies that we established with two agricultural scientific institutions in Sumy and Bila Tserkva near Kiev region. We support in technical operations. We do actually these studies, and we are finalizing the development of agri-climatic atlas for soya growing in Ukraine, where we analyzed different scientific materials describing the climate change topic and provide some valuable solutions for the farmers how to overcome all of this. Here, I'd like also to greet my nice colleague Anastasia, that actually implementing together with my other Ukrainian colleagues these activities. So thank you, Anastasia, for doing this quite big job here in Ukraine. And why actually all this is so much important? There is a concept named yield gap that is based on definition and measurement of yield potential. We took the data from Wageningen University global yield gap analysis, and also the data of current yields for soya from State Statistical Service of Ukraine. And we can say, together with my colleagues that are doing research analytical data in agriculture, that soya yield gap in Ukraine is nearly 0.9 tons per hectare, which represents around 27% of soybean yield potential in Ukraine. What does it mean? On a country level, this means that simply increasing the sustainable farming practices, we can add additionally 1.3 million tons of soya, just increasing farming practices. This equals 10% of European production. So simply only in Ukraine, this might be produced additionally. But definitely, yield gap is applicable for mainly all field crops and mostly for Eastern European countries. So this is how our vision presented by Susanne, how the increase of sustainable non-GM deforestation conversion-free production in Europe for consumption in Europe might be simply done. Definitely, we also do quality assurance activities under Donau Soja Europe soya standards that guarantee sustainability, non-GM deforestation, and conversion-free. These activities include witness audits, coordination, sampling, and analytical tests. And as a result of these activities, this year in 2022, we can proudly say that near 500,000 tons available in Ukraine as certified non-GM deforestation and conversion-free soybeans in Europe. If to talk about some environmental result of this activity, Susanne showed this perfect study from Blond Consultants, how Europe soya or Donau soya certified beans produce less carbon emissions than just ordinary production in Europe. So in total, it resulted that around 260,000 tons of equivalent of carbon emissions was avoided just as soya footprint. And definitely the number of other environmental key performance indicators are available in Donau Soja reporting that we do at the end of the year. If you'd like to talk more about sustainability issues in soya production in Ukraine, you can reach me easily by my contacts you can see on the screen or just via LinkedIn. Here I should say thank you so much, and I am ready to answer questions, and I also pass the floor to Axel.
Thank you, Volodymyr. Let me repeat this impressive figure. 3.7 million tons of soybeans have been produced in 2022 in Ukraine with stable exports, and this despite the war. So I'm quite sure you have questions either for Susanne or for Volodymyr. Please write them in the chat. I will pass them on. One question from Donau. What is the reason for the lower carbon footprint, CO2 footprint of DS beans compared with other European beans? Susanne, do you want to answer this?
Yeah, thank you.
Overseas soy cultivation and Europe, and this is around 90%. This is because of deforestation. So deforestation really makes a big impact on CO2 emissions. And in Europe, obviously, there is less deforestation and land conversion. But also in Europe, so that's why this is a factor, but not the main factor in Europe. Main factor in Europe is a multi-issue thing. It's about efficient use of inputs. It's about best soy cultivation in terms of efficient use of fertilizers, pesticides, all of this. And it's a combination of all the things. So it's not one single factor, but it's a combination. And this is also why the protein partnership and the knowledge transfer activities are so important, because here we have the farmers' knowledge transfer and exchange activities, how to use best the inputs and how to do the cultivation conditions to have the best yield. And then, of course, per ton, the emission goes down. But maybe my colleague Vladimir wants to add something here. We have done the calculations in Serbia, Romania, Ukraine. We see the different results, but it depends on how good the farmers are in best practice of soil cultivation and how efficient they are using the inputs and how about the yield. Vladimir, would you like to add?
Yes, Susanne, thank you for this, and thank you, Donald, for the question. Definitely, what we can see that actually the farmers in Ukraine, the data, the primary data for calculation for cultivations that were calculated by Blond, they simply have quite good knowledge of doing cultivation of growing soybeans. They simply use less pesticides, fertilizers. They simply optimize on-field operations, spending less fuels, so providing and implementing the best practical examples how to do soya cultivation, because this is actually somehow required under the Donau Soja and Europe Soya standard. And these companies, they are working with Donau Soja for a long time, and they participated in the trainings. They know the Donau Soja best practice for sustainable soya cultivation. So they are in everyday contact, they gain the best knowledge of how to do this. And all this results in quite incredible result for saving or avoiding of carbon emission just during ordinary non-GM soya production.
Die andere Frage kannst du mir geben, wenn du magst.
Thank you, Volodymyr. There's one question from a not logged in participant. What does the European Union do to mitigate risks with importing GMO cultivated soybeans from Ukraine? Susanne.
Yeah, thank you, Axel. That's really an interesting question. Of course, it is allowed to import GM soy to the EU. It's just not allowed to do the cultivation. Same thing is actually in Ukraine. There is no legal soy cultivation in Ukraine. The cultivation of soy is also illegal in Ukraine today. So you might have some GM imports. The problem is about the declaration. And if you want to be sure that you get the non-GM soybeans imported, of course, you need to go for some sort of a certification. And here, Donau Soja, I think, is the #1 in Ukraine, because as Vladimir mentioned, we have 500,000 tons certified in Ukraine. And that means it's a certified non-GM. And that's a significant contribution to the availability of non-GM soy in Europe.
Thank you. One more question. Maybe it's already our last question for today. Yoko asked, I guess this is for you, Susanne. Do you have any information about organic soybean cultivation in Europe?
Yes, we do, but I do not have the figures here right now. So I'm asking to the audience, maybe Bertalan is still with us. He could probably provide some figures. Otherwise, we will send you the information after the webinar.
Bertalan, are you still with us for information to pass on to Finland?
Maybe I will also add here that this season we have combined organic and Donau Soja certified soybeans also in Ukraine. So additional assurance just to ordinary organic certification, additional assurance in absence of pesticides, and additional assurance that this comes from actually European country from Ukraine. It's not like re-imported or something like this. So additional assurance on origination and truly absence of use of any of substances is available in Ukraine. So if interesting, we can connect you with our companies for further communication.
Not now. I can see that in the meantime, in the chat, the discussion on organic figures is going on, and Bertalan and Leo Rittler will send information to Finland. One truly international question, and this, I guess, really is the last for today, is from Werner Schmitz. West Africa is exporting 250,000 tons of non-GM soybeans per year, especially to India. Could West Africa join the Protein Partnership Program as well?
Interested to discuss and have cooperation also on the global level. So I suggest we start a bilateral discussion on this, because I know that we have some partners also in Africa. They are not exactly working in the Protein Partnership Program, but we will be definitely interested to get into discussion.
Thank you, Susanne, for this answer. So let's come to an end for today. Thank you all for participating in today's Donau Soja webinar. Thank you, Susanne in Vienna and Volodymyr in Kiev, for your valuable informations and for the discussion. The recording of this webinar will be available soon on LinkedIn, so stay in touch with Donau Soja and watch out for the next webinars to come. All the best.